Hey everybody, just a quick content warning. In the beginning of this episode, I briefly talk about suicidal ideation, postpartum depression, and postpartum anxiety. So if those topics feel a little bit too tender or triggering for you right now, consider saving this episode for listening at a later time. Also, if you or someone you know is struggling with suicidal thoughts or postpartum depression and anxiety, I will leave some great resources in the show notes. Hey, I'm Mia Hemstad. I'm a wife, I'm a mom of 2 kids, and I'm a trauma-informed self-care coach. I also live with diagnosed PTSD and depression. I started sharing my mental wellness journey online in 2017 when I was diagnosed with postpartum depression and anxiety. And since then, I've heard from hundreds of women who all struggle with the same thing, putting ourselves last. This is a struggle that's keeping so many women burned out and unhappy, through no fault of our own, by the way. I've been working on my own healing as an abuse survivor since 2013. But when I became a mom, I really started to do the inner work of figuring out why I was putting myself last and how to start prioritizing myself for the first time in my life. This podcast is about sharing all of those lessons with you. So if you're interested in hearing honest stories, life advice, and inspiration that encourages you to make your health, happiness, and well-being a priority, then definitely stick around. Welcome to your No Longer Last journey. Hey everybody, it's Mia. Welcome back to the podcast. Today is a very special day because I am actually interviewing someone, which is super exciting. But before I share that conversation with you, I just wanted to give you a little bit of an intro so that you kind of know what it's all about and why I'm bringing this up. So I took a little bit of a break from the podcast, if you noticed, and it was to host my program, Rituals That Replenish. It was a mini program. It was only 3 weeks long, and there was a lot of facilitated journaling. I wrote journal prompts and guided women through the process of getting to know themselves and really understanding what it is that they need to feel replenished, because for every single one of us, it's different. And it really brought up this podcast idea of the power of journaling and kind of hearing about it, not necessarily from a bullet pointed list of all the positive benefits of journaling, because how many of us have read those articles from like Psychology Today, or maybe it's just me, Psychology Today or positivepsychology.com, listing just hundreds of bullet points from all these studies over the decades showing us the power of journaling. You know, it reduces anxiety, reduces depression symptoms, improves clarity, all that stuff, right? We know that it's helpful on paper. We have the data. But if it's so helpful, then why is it that so many of us don't do it? So what I'm hoping today is, from my conversation with Nikita, and also I'm going to share a little bit of my story and my history with journaling, that you'll be inspired to take back up the practice and try to find your own groove in journaling that works for you. Because I also think there's this concept that journaling has to be done like at a beautiful cafe with beautiful music in the background and no one bothering you, and perfect stationery and perfect pen and all this stuff that just is fluff and just makes it harder to really leverage and use the practice. I don't know why I use the word leverage. It's probably because I've been doing like marketing proposals. Anyway, so before we dive into Nikita's conversation, which I know y'all are going to love, I want to introduce her first. So Nikita Burks-Hale, she's fantastic. She's such a calm, just grounding energy. I love just talking with her and being around her. She's such a nice presence. But also, she is the CEO and Chief Coloring Officer at Headphones and Crayons, which I love the name of her organization that she runs. And she does a lot of different things, but I mainly want to just share with you that she hosts a community where you can color and share and talk. It's like a healing space where you come together with other people and you can color and talk about life and whatever is going on with you. And she facilitates that space. And as a group facilitator myself, you know, I run the No Longer Last Journey and I facilitate a support group once a month. I know that facilitating groups, number one, is not easy, and number two, is super healing and needed, because all of the people who join my group, and I've been to support groups personally, it's so helpful to be around other people in community where the sole focus is about like recentering, and recharging. So I'll leave more details about Nikita in the show notes, but that's why one of the reasons why I wanted to have her on, because she kind of understands the work and why it's so important to take time for ourselves. So I knew that was already in alignment, and y'all know I'm all about that on this show. I just really want all of us in whatever way we can to take time for ourselves. But specifically, I wanted to talk about journaling today because last month in September, we're in October now, but in September, it was National Suicide Awareness Month. And I really wanted to make a grand post or YouTube video, but I just couldn't get myself to do it. And it's mainly just because this month is extremely personal to me. And I don't know why, but I just felt like I could talk more about it on the podcast. The podcast, I don't know, just feels more intimate, and I feel like I could just really just talk and be myself with y'all. So thank you for listening. So several years ago, when I was really in the thick of new motherhood, stay-at-home motherhood, I had an infant and a 2-year-old. And I was also full-time caregiver for my brother. My brother has a very serious disease. He also has autism. So when I say full-time caregiver, I mean full-time caregiver. So needless to say, I was going through a lot. And at one point, what was just burnout became depression. What was depression became clinical depression. And then from there, I started to have intrusive suicidal ideation. And the suicidal thoughts became so bad that one day I actually had to call my husband to come home from work, which I would never do because his work at the time was not okay with that kind of stuff. I called him, and then I had to call the National Suicide Hotline in order to stay alive. And I don't talk about that a lot because it's still really hard to process that I even got that far, right? That it was like that bad. But I think especially for mothers, and especially for Black mothers, because I've been stereotyped as being a bad mother, it's a whole nother story. But for mothers, it's like we're not allowed to say that we have suicidal ideation, and I really think it's important that we're allowed to talk through that. But what does all of this have to do with me wanting you to journal more if you can? Well, I talk about self-care a lot, but there's really before you can know what you need to know, before you can know what self-care is going to help you, you need to know your needs. You need to know who you are. You need to know what's going on with you. And one of the things I started doing after I made it through that really dark day where I had to call the National Suicide Hotline, I don't know what came over me, but I grabbed a piece of printer paper. And after my kids ate breakfast and they were watching Cocomelon, their favorite show at the time, I grabbed a piece of printer paper and I wrote health, gratitude, goals. I just wrote those 3 things. And I wasn't much of a prompt journaler in the past. I was very much a free write journaler, but my brain was so, when you're depressed and you just got a lot of brain fog and mom brain and all this, it's very hard to free write. You don't know. You're just like, what? So for some reason, I'm a spiritual person. I believe in some sort of good entity out there, providing us with inspiration. And the words health, gratitude, goals came to me. So with health, I started to just free write about my health. How was I doing mentally? How was I doing emotionally? How was I doing physically? And I would just write about that. And of course, it was like, I'm doing awful. I'm doing terrible. I hate myself. I feel worthless. I feel like I'm in over my head. I feel like a bad mom. I feel like I'm never going to be enough. And then I would go into gratitude and I would write 3 things I'm grateful for. And then in the goals section, you think I'd be like, 5-year goals? No, not 5-year goals. The goal was one goal for that week only that would relate to getting myself out of the pit that I was in. So it was always a goal related to what I wrote in the health section. So that was the very first time that I wrote down, find a psychiatrist, get a diagnosis, get on medication. And I was so scared to try medication. I come from a family that's so anti-medication, so anti-medication. So for me to be like, I'm ready to get on medication, that was a huge deal. I was really far gone. But now I preach, don't wait till you're far gone to get on medication. It's just like any other treatment plan. We really should not stigmatize mental health medication because maybe we would save more lives. But anyway, different topic for a different day. But basically, every week on Monday, after I fed my kids and put them in front of little baby bum, I would grab a piece of printer paper, I'd write health gratitude goals, and I would fill those out, and I would take action on that one item, that one goal every week. And that alone helped me to call my insurance, figure out my coverage, find a psychiatrist in my area that took my insurance, find childcare so that I could go to my appointment, get diagnosed, get on medication for the first time, and start feeling like myself for the first time since I had become a mother almost 3 years prior to that moment. And it really, it saved my life. It changed my life. It changed my relationship to medication. I'm on medication now, and it's saving my life now. It's really helping me function and live and enjoy my time here in Portugal and not be like out of it. But yeah, printer paper journaling with prompts, with very simple one-word prompts saved me. And basically, all of those experiences I told you about just now, like, kind of all came together with like the 4B self-care framework and all these other things that I teach to help people understand self-care a little bit more intimately. It all came together in the program I just finished hosting, which is why I was taking a break from the podcast, called Rituals That Replenish. It was a 3-week program with a lot of guided journaling. And Nikita, who is one of the members of Rituals That Replenish, she took the time to share with me how much the program and the journaling was surprising her, was helping her, was enlightening her, was just her insights. I was like, it's like, you know, when someone puts into words something that you feel, that's what it felt like talking with Nikita. Like, she was experiencing the emotional shifts that I feel when I journal, but she was putting it into words. And, you know, I could talk to you all day about why you should journal. Hopefully my personal share just now can help you maybe pick it up and do it imperfectly with printer paper. But I also think this conversation with Nikita is going to light you up and inspire you even more. She's such a warm presence, and she had a lot of great things to share. So this is my conversation with Nikita about her experience with guided journaling in Rituals That Replenish. And I will leave all the details about Rituals That Replenish and where you can find details about Nikita in the show notes, as always. And I want to thank you so much for listening. Take care. Hello, everybody. I am so excited to welcome to the No Longer Last Journey podcast, Nikita. Nikita, I'm so excited to have you here. Welcome to the podcast.
I am so excited to be here and to have this conversation, especially with you today.
I really wanted to have you on today because we've had some incredible offline conversations recently that made me go, oh my goodness, you know what? Other women need to hear your perspective on this, on journaling, on taking a pause, on all the things that I think we resist doing. You had some insights that I thought other people need to hear, because I know it's going to inspire them to take a pause and to do some reflection and introspection. So I want to ask you, though, to introduce yourself, because you're a super cool person, and I want everyone to have some background on you. Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, so I am Nikita Burks-Hale, and I am a journeyer. First off, if I had to describe myself, I am a mom, an entrepreneur, a creative podcaster, and a coloring enthusiast, as I like to say. And so I have been in this space for, a few decades. And my goal in life is really just to show up imperfectly every day and to create spaces for folks to do the same, and also as fully as they can for whatever that means for them. So, yeah.
I love that. I love that. I love that you use the word journeyer. And I'm going to be honest, I was like, I know what that means, but I wonder how, I know what that means for me, but I wonder how you interpret it. Like, what is a journeyer?
That is a really good question. I would say for me, a journeyer is someone who is here for the entirety of life. And for someone who has struggled with postpartum depression, anxiety, and has had downs, ups, lows, peaks, valleys, I am committed for myself to be here for the duration of my life. That's a really powerful statement for me. And so that's what a journeyer for me means. It also means showing up. Sometimes that's at 1% capacity. Sometimes that's at 110% capacity, and every place in between. So it's here for it. I'm here for everything that life has to offer me. I may not receive it all at one time, but just I'm here for the journey that is life.
Oh my gosh, I love that because I feel, I don't know if you feel this, but like when things go wrong in life or they're hard or they're sad or they're just messed up, it feels like you've done something wrong, or like life isn't worth living if it's not in technicolor, if it's not shiny and sparkly and highlight reel and everything's going great. Look at how perfect every area of my life is. And so, I mean, I feel that pressure sometimes. It's like I almost feel like we've been conditioned through social media over the last 10, 15 years to feel like life isn't worth sharing or experiencing if it's not shareable, like social media, what we say Instagram worthy, right?
Mm-hmm.
I like, and so this idea of being a journeyer, like saying my identity is I'm going to live life to the fullest.
Mm-hmm.
And not just that, but like, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you're saying I am going to embrace it all. I'm just going to live through it all. It's all part of it.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Exactly.
such a beautiful perspective. Oh,
Yeah, and
sorry,
it
I'm just
ground.
taking that in. That wasn't part of my plan. I didn't think we were going to go there, but I'm just like, oh, wow, what a way to approach life so that anybody, if you're listening to this and you're going through a depression right now, Nikita has shared generously about her experiences postpartum depression and anxiety and going through some of that. I remember reading some of your Facebook posts, I think, about that. And I just think that to say, hey, that's part of the journey and it's still worth it to go through the journey, even if some of this journey is dark as hell and sucks and shouldn't be this way, like that you're here for it. What a
Exactly.
powerful thing.
It is. It's what gets you through on the deeper days. And like you said, we didn't expect to go here this quickly. So our apologies
Mm-hmm.
for not a disclaimer before, but
Oh, I'll
it's
make sure to have one in the intro. Don't worry.
wonderful. So on those like especially dark days, it's for me knowing that I'm a leader in all ways, even in the
Mm-hmm.
times that I don't want to be. And so if I have a visual, like I lead everywhere in my life, and on those dark days, I embrace my journey and know that it's okay to follow. It's okay to let
Mm,
go, to take time, to take space, to take time to pause, which I know we'll be talking about today, and to
mm-hmm.
follow and be led by
Mm.
nature, by my heart, by what I truly need, whatever it may be. And so that's what that journey really is.
I love that you talked about how, like, that sometimes in this journey of life with the ups and the downs, that it's important to take space. And so when I created Rituals That Replenish, first of all, I was like, is anyone even going to want to come and journal with me? Because the core of this program is there's some self-care education, right? Like I did some teaching, but a good portion of every session was spent journaling. And it was spent journaling with prompts that I wrote and designed specifically to help people discover what they needed to replenish themselves in this season they're in. So now that I'm hearing you talk, it doesn't surprise me that you were the first person to join my program. And as an entrepreneur, you probably know the feeling when you launch something and you share it with the world and you're just hoping that people like want to be a part of it. And I go into my inbox and I see shortly after sending an email to my email community that Nikita Burks-Hale has joined Rituals That Replenish. And I just was like, thank you for showing up for me. Thank you for validating my idea. Thank you for being there for every session. Like seriously, it means so much. But now that I'm hearing you talk, I'm like, you get it. But what I want to hear though, like you're busy though. You have a lot going on. You have two little kids. Can you share their ages?
Yeah, so I have my son will be 5 in December, and my daughter will be 2 in next February. So almost 5 and almost 2.
Wow. So you're like really in it. Like you're really in it when it comes to mothering. Like those like kids of that age, they have a lot of needs. So taking time, even though it's important, taking time in this group setting where it's not on necessarily your schedule. I said, hey, the sessions will be on this day, this time. You came to everyone. Why did Rituals That Replenish attract you? And why is it that you were like, I'm going to make time for this, even though I have a lot on my plate?
And it's that exact reason. Kind of flip. I remember the email coming through and I was looking at this and I was like, okay, 3 Saturdays 90 minutes each time. Ooh, that's a lot. I was like, in journaling, like, you know what?
Mm-hmm.
I have been being told and telling folks about the power of journaling, the power of taking time and space to be, and I'm not doing it. And I was like, here's
Mm-hmm.
a way that has a very low cost to entry.
Mm-hmm.
And a Saturday when I'm not working, because I also have a full-time job on top of my
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneurship, and I know that I will be at home and I think I can figure out childcare for 90 minutes. I was like, I feel like this is a time to do it. Like it was a spur, not even a split decision or a rash decision, but it
Mm-hmm.
was because it felt absolute. Like this is
Mm-hmm.
that time. We're gonna
Mm-hmm.
make it happen. I want this and I need this right now.
Oh, I love that. I'm so well, I'm just like so grateful. But it just kind of like leads me to my next thing though, just thinking about how you're like, it's so actually so courageous of you to say, I encourage other people to take time, but I'm not taking time. I just like have to stop there. Like I have so many questions coming to mind, but I just have to stop there. You know how many coaches, like myself included, like when I'm not taking care of myself, I'm like, oh my gosh, does this mean I'm not a coach? Like, because it's just like, I'm not practicing what I preach. It's just like, where do we get this idea that we have to be perfect just because we teach something that we know works? Just because we know, like, I'm hearing this quote, someone was like, just because we know how to eat healthy doesn't mean that we're going to do it all the time. Like, that's not humanity. And so I love that you we're like, oh, sometimes we just need to be led, especially if we're at 1% capacity. And I think that's the beauty of looking to people for support and being humble enough to go, I need help right now, or I could use a space or whatever. And so you're teaching me in that. So thank you. But one of the things that maybe, I don't know if you were expecting this or not, how much journaling there was. Like, can you share like what your thoughts were on that? How was journaling, especially with prompts for you? Like, is that something you were used to doing? Are you a freehand journaler, like no prompts? Like, what is your experience with journaling and how did that kind of prepare you or lead you into the journaling for rituals that replenish?
It's funny because my journey with journaling is funny because I will be hardcore and like in it, and I have the brand new beautiful journal, and for like 3 days I'm just free writing. I usually am a free writer where I just write whatever comes to mind, may not be full sentences. I fill the space with words, with pictures
Mm-hmm.
and whatnot. But I haven't done it in forever, and so when I joined the program, my focus was on like rituals and how
Mm-hmm.
to establish these rituals, which for me was
Mm-hmm.
this way to honor and nourish myself, which is what I have
Mm-hmm.
been truly missing. And so
Mm-hmm.
when I saw the workbook and I was like, oh, we're going to be journaling, cool. That'll allow me to really settle in with my thoughts, my inner thoughts, my inner needs, as opposed to the first thing that comes to mind. Like, oh, well, what do you want to do today? Well, I saw that TikTok of somebody taking a luxurious bath or showing how to make bath bombs. So I'll take a bath. And instead, it's like, what do you feel? And there were some things we shared during the session of, if I do baths or showers, I need to be aware of the time of day. So to answer the question, the journaling, it was it was something that I was like, oh, okay, this will be cool. But as I got into it, the clarity that poured out of me in these guided questions that were simple. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't these huge, broad, like, tell me about your, and I'm going to say journey 50 million times. So thank you all for my,
No worries.
but tell me about this entire journey of how you've used rituals, how you want to use it. It was like, what do you need right now? What are you
Mm-hmm.
missing? It was very straight to the point that just allowed me to unload. So I looked forward to them, and I didn't get a chance to journal outside of class. But when I was there for that 90 minutes, besides us talking, I was writing the entire time.
Yes, exactly. Oh, that makes me so happy to hear. And I hope people are hearing that like it truly can be simple. You don't have to ask yourself these thesis level dissertation questions. Like I can't tell you how much I hate prompts that are like run-on sentences and they just go on forever. And I feel like I've missed the piece. Let me go back and make sure I answered everything. Let me go back and make sure I'm putting it in order. Like I seriously just wanted to be like, how are you doing mentally? Do you have brain fog? Do you have this? And so I'm glad to hear the feedback that the simplicity was helpful, and that the clarity that you gained was helpful. But it sounds like you kind of were like, oh, we're going to like talk about rituals and like build practices. And then you were like, wait, journaling? There's a lot of blank lines in this reflection guide Mia's giving us. And yes, it has to start there because you have to fill it up. Like it needs to be about you, not what I tell you should do. So, I love that kind of like, you're not the only one who was like, I didn't think we were going to be writing so much, but so that's really cool. So one of the questions I had though was, out of everything I taught in the, the trauma-informed self-care education piece, but also through facilitating your journaling and your introspection, like what did you find the most helpful over the 3 weeks that we worked together?
What did I find? I think that I found it honestly really was the journaling.
I love that. I
And
love that. The clarity.
The clarity. And it was because, again, when you were just saying I didn't quite expect it, but it wouldn't have been what it was without it. It was like that missing piece that I didn't know that I needed. Because how can you really create rituals and replenish yourself if you don't take time to not only ask, but write it out or talk it out about what comes up? So it's vital. It's that foundational piece. And so that journaling was really what cemented it, because this is what I go back to. This is in late nights when I'm like, okay, I'm feeling depleted, or something's moving. I'm feeling movement. What do I need right now? Going back to say, whoa, not necessarily what that thing was I wrote down, but read over everything and remember that feeling. Remember that mindset and everything that I learned and embodied in that time. And then that puts me in the space to really say, well, what do you need right
now? I love that, the going back to, because I think, at least for me, it's like when I get into moments where I feel life is just too hectic and too busy and everybody's needing things and I'm just too tired, I just don't even remember what I need. And that's the beauty of having some written words, not just relying on yourself to come up with the answers up here in your mind, because mothers especially, so much of our attention is split into so many buckets. Every child is a bucket, and then your home is a bucket, and work is a bucket, and then entrepreneurship is a bucket. And then if you have any chronic health issues like I do, those are all buckets, individual buckets. Okay. Where's the bucket for you? There's probably not much space left for any more buckets in your brain. And so for me, journaling, having that physical, tangible object outside of me is a bucket. It's a tangible bucket. It's mine. And it's the one bucket in my life that's just about me. I try not to put anything about any other area of my life in my journal. Like no appointment reminders, no grocery list, nothing. Like this needs to just be for me. And that's hard for me because I don't like to be organized. Like I swear I've bought so many journals and they end up becoming my planner and everything else. And then I don't even want to look at it because it reminds me of work. So I kind of love that idea of having a space to return when you're just like, something's happening, but I don't really know what direction to go in. So it's interesting to hear that the journaling was really most helpful for you. For me, I would say whenever I've done coaching things, it's like the Q&A section. So in Rituals at Replenish, for those who don't know, we had a 30-minute Q&A after the teaching and the journaling, and it was for people to share. And I actually found most people were pretty like, I'm still processing everything I wrote. I'm still thinking. People didn't really have a lot to share, and that's totally fine. I'm a verbal processor, so it's almost like I need to say it out loud and write it. It's like I'm just one of those people. But I thought it was very interesting that it was kind of just like everyone was just kind of sitting with it, and also kind of just, wow, I didn't realize I felt these things or knew. And I'm just wondering, like, it can be challenging to, like, do you feel like you're pretty in touch with like your general needs day to day, or do you need to be like reminded of yourself? Because there's like phases in motherhood, I feel like. And when I was at the phase you're at, where my kids were 2 and 4, I didn't know what I wanted or needed. I wasn't even drinking water. Like,
Mhm.
like where are you at in that journey of kind of like being in tune with your needs, would you
Yeah.
say?
And so I was getting excited about this question because I felt it coming, and it was something I was going to say with the buckets. And
Oh, okay.
it was really interesting how you were talking about the different buckets of your life, and
Mm-hmm.
the one for yourself is always left off. And so the
Mm-hmm.
way that I look at the buckets, and it's basically how like I show up for myself, is that whenever I create a bucket, I disassociate. So it's no longer a part of me. It is like, this is work. This is something
Mm-hmm.
like a third person type thing. And so
Mm-hmm.
this rituals that replenish allowed me through the journaling and through the Q&As to pour myself back into each of these buckets, because I actually have a pretty
Mm-hmm.
big me bucket that is way over in the corner, never seen, never touched. It's full of water. Some of that water is stale. It's
Mm-hmm.
just there. But none of me is in anything else that I do, relatively speaking. Like, there's always a part of me, but what I'm learning now is to pour bits of my personality, my needs, my boundaries into each of those buckets of my life, as opposed to feeling like I can't, because it is supreme.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know that was a really kind of different way of answering the question, but
No.
it allowed me to, like, I have all these needs, but I've never really tapped into them because there was work, because there was kids. And so now it allowed me to start looking at my needs at work, my needs to my life, my needs with my kids, with the business, and kind of go from there. So if it were, because I'm all about coloring and have the coloring community, if it were a color, like I'm this purple, but all the other buckets are clear. And so I'm able to
Mm-hmm.
color that water a little bit more with myself. Some are darker, some are lighter, some are still clear, but it gives me a visual representation of, is this for you? Does this feel good
Mm-hmm.
for you? Are you actually even doing this for you? If not, then do we
Mm-hmm.
need to release it and let it go?
Wow. Oh, I love that analogy. Oh, yeah. It's almost like when we're so depleted, it's like you were saying, the dissociation. All of these aspects of our life just kind of become these just ball and chain. Like they're just there,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
we're not a part of it. We're not an active participant. Like for a long time for me in early motherhood, I just felt like these kids are a part of my life and I'm responsible, but I felt so dissociated. It only was in the last year that I started to actually feel like I embodied motherhood. Like I'm like, I am a mother. But
Mm-hmm.
for the longest time, and I felt really ashamed of this, I didn't feel like I was a mom.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just felt like I was responsible and I had all the responsibilities, but I didn't embody it. Like I wasn't a part of it. Like you were saying, that color that is me wasn't a part of my kids, which sounds
Right.
so sad. But I think that's what happens when we're so out of touch with ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We're just kind of existing in the world. We're not really journeying fully, like you would say. Like we're not really here for it. We're just kind of like slugging through. So,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what I think is like one of the things that helped me heal and hopefully can help you is like the more I connected with myself and fed the needs that my soul was screaming for, the more I started to be able to put myself, infuse my color into these parts of my world. Right. So that's such a beautiful analogy. And I just kind of love where that conversation went there.
Yeah.
Um, Another question I wanted to ask you about this process was there anything surprising that you learned that, maybe, sometimes people are like, oh, I didn't think that this was a part of self-care, or I didn't think I could think of self-care this way. Was there anything that surprised you in the process, or even something that came from you journaling? Like, I didn't realize I had that need. I'd love to
Mm-hmm.
know.
Definitely the framework. Like, it blew my mind having the bees. And it was
Really?
like, yeah, because you always hear like self-care is all encompassing. It's all of these things. It's just one, but to have these different levels, and the two that really stood out were boring and bougie. And like boring being
Really?
yeah. And it was because with boring, like boring self-care is the things as someone who is my brain is wired differently, is those things that cause me the most anxiety and the most stress, like cleaning and the dishes and just I feel better when there's less clutter. And also to clear that clutter is a lot. And so
Mm,
that's back and forth between the two, but knowing like this will make you feel better if you
yes.
do this. When you now look around and it just you take a deep breath when the kitchen is clean. You take a deep breath when you can when it's just not stuff everywhere. When in the midst
Mm-hmm.
of all the kids screaming and crying, you can still look around and like, okay, well, I can the house isn't a mess as well to add on to it.
Mm-hmm.
So boring self care really, I was like, oh, okay, I see the value. And then bougie, what really struck me about that is, I think you said it on the very last day, but it was that most folks kind of, even for the word bougie, like, oh, I don't have the money for the massages and things, but it's something that we truly yearn for.
Mm-hmm.
To really just, without any society imposed boundaries, to truly
Mm-hmm.
take care of ourselves in any, I don't even want to use extravagant, but any way that feels good at that moment,
Mm-hmm.
whether it be a bath, whether it be a week long trip out of the country, whether it be a night going out for dinner, whether it be at a hotel, like in the hotel for 3 days by yourself with room service. Like what I found with bougie is that that's kind of society imposed. And so it really is
Mm-hmm.
tackling that head on of it's what you want. Society
Mm-hmm.
has attempted to say what is for who and who it's
Mm-hmm.
not for, but you
Mm-hmm.
ultimately get to decide. And so that was very freeing and liberating for me. It's like I can, as a queer woman of color, I can
Mm-hmm.
have this. It's not
Oh,
fancy. It's my
yes.
birthright.
Oh.
So yeah.
Oh my gosh, I just loved that, especially realizing like that you get to decide what's for you. And I think that's huge. I mean, we all have our own history with what we feel we're allowed to have.
Mhm.
And I know for me, I had to work from a very young age. And so I definitely developed the story of, but people like me aren't allowed to have this, to have ease, to be honest with you. So one of the things is I used to be a housekeeper for several years. And it took a long time for me to realize that a bougie self-care item for me isn't actually massages or facials, although I would love to have that. But if I look at what my budget is, right, we have to be real about our money, which is something I regularly encourage in anything I teach, is the moment I get the finances, let's say there's a little chunk of money here and I can spend it on bougie self-care. The first thing I'm getting is not a hotel and it's not a trip and it's not any of that. It's a housekeeper to come once a month to deep clean the bathroom, to do the floors, to do the vacuuming. And for a long time, I was like, but people like me aren't allowed to have that. Because in my mind, people like me are people of color, people who grew up poor, people who are housekeepers for other people, um, and
Mhm.
for other people. So to like you were saying, it's almost like rewiring our identity of what we believe we deserve
Mhm.
and to practice deservingness, right? And it goes so much deeper than going, I got a facial, check. I did what
Exactly.
somebody else, I spent the money. And I think that's where a lot of the guilt comes. People say, well, I feel guilty when I spend on bougie self-care. And I'm like, well, was it something you truly like valued? You could still feel a little bad about stuff because it can be challenging, right? To spend money on yourself if you're so used to not doing that. I think when it's something you've done the journaling, you've done the introspection, and you're like, this is really important to me, then it feels like a self-honoring activity to spend that money. It feels like a way to love yourself better. And I think when we spend our money in that way, it um there's a lot less guilt associated with it. I think the guilt comes when we're trying to fit into society, what society says we deserve or don't deserve, or what we should spend our money on. Then it feels bad because it's not in alignment with who you really are and what you really need. So I just think that was so insightful because I didn't even think about the whole what I believe I deserve, Black queer women I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
that's really cool to dig into deservingness as a function of bougie self-care. But
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that. I thought that framework was so cheesy when I created it. It took me over a year to start sharing it on social media after I had wrote it.
It
I'm
was
like, this is
amazing.
so weird. I'm like, people are going to think it's so weird that I'm categorizing self-care with words that start with B. Like and then you know what? I just started sharing it and realizing a lot of people's brains work like mine. They need these categories. They need these checklists and buckets because it's too much to discern. I get overwhelmed when people are like, self-care is everything. Self-care is community care. Self-care is this. Self-care is saying no. Self-care. And I'm just like, what do I need to do? I'm tired, but I don't know how to help myself. Oh my God.
Exactly. And it's like, if a self-care is all in one bucket for me, then what used to happen for me for the longest was I've never been one to get my nails done because I used to be a massage therapist, so it was pointless. But I'd always go out and like massages or like things that spend. But then I come home to a messy house and be just as stressed. And I'm like, but I did self-care. I did self-care. Why don't I feel good? It's because what I was doing wasn't what I needed. And the only way for me to
Yep.
get clear on that is to when I came home and still felt the same way when I left, to journal, to take that time and say, what's going on here? Like I went out to eat. I treated myself to lunch. I went to the movies and it was like, but is this what you really wanted? Is this what you really needed? It's like, no, actually, what I wanted is just to have a clean, quiet house. So send the kids and the wife out, and you take an hour to put on blast the music to Disney for me, jump around clean, and then you have another 3 hours to be in a clean, quiet house. That is my boring slash. It crosses over into bougie self care.
Yes. Time alone.
Mm-hmm.
Time alone, if that's what you really need.
Right.
Oh my gosh. Love that. That was a whole teaching moment right there. I loved that. Another thing I wanted to ask you before we wrap up is, what are you taking away from this experience? I mean, I know you already touched on it, but is there one seed that you're just like, moving on, I'm going to keep trying to do this? Fill in the blank.
I'm going to keep trying to do this because what I have a really good habit of doing, because habits for a reason, so they're not bad, they're just something you've perfected, quote unquote. So what I have a good habit of doing is to be all in during a program, and then I'm like, next.
Yes.
And I like tie it up in a bow and don't come back to it. And I do not want to do that. This is one of the first programs in a while where I'm like, I don't, I can't let this go. Like, this is going to be ongoing. And so I'm hoping to continue on in this space. And because this is what I need to continue going. This is the replenish and the nourishment. That was a word that really came up for me, nourishment. This is the nourishment that I need to keep doing what I'm doing, to keep being the powerhouse that I am, to keep affecting and impacting the lives the way that I do. I need to first do that for myself. So that's what I'm taking, is to keep doing this, to keep going through like each week. On Saturday, I'm going to set aside this time to go back to those questions. Does something new come up? If not, continue that thought, continue writing, so that way I can keep this forward movement and really stay true to myself.
I'm trying not to get emotional. That was so beautiful. Seriously though, like that was what I really hoped women walked away with from this, was like, I can journal for 20 minutes on a Saturday because I've done it with Mia the last 3 weeks. And I can just use you can use those prompts for the rest of your life, like the weekly wellness check-in prompts for the rest of your life. And I love how you were saying, I need this replenishment. I need this nourishment in order to be amazing in these other areas of my life, to show up for these other areas. And that's what I want people to see. Like, I get that we have bills to pay and things and dreams to achieve, but if you are depleted, you're not going to be able to put water, your special color in any of those buckets. When we take care of ourselves sustainably, regularly, not every time we burn out, but like on a regular basis, the quality of your life improves in all the buckets. My motherhood got better when I started taking care of myself. My marriage got better. My work got better. Like my creativity, it's just, we're not isolated from each other. And I think when we do isolate and we dissociate, life just becomes so like black and white. And it doesn't need to be that way. And so I just love that you see the connection there.
Yeah.
That one of the things I just really want to do is just, I want to rebrand self-care. So it's not this shallow, surface level, superficial thing. And I want people to see it the way you just described, which is, I know that if I nourish myself and show up regularly for this practice, it's going to affect change in all these other areas. And you're going to be able to show up for the community that you're building. And since we're running out of time, I would love for you to tell us about the community that you've been cultivating and the way that you show up for women.
Yeah, so I realized I didn't mention it in the beginning, which is totally fine. But my business is called Headphones and Crayons, and we're a space for the amplification of sound, voice, and color. So I do podcasting, podcast coaching, but then this other huge portion that's integrated in everything I do is color. Really, I literally have an adult coloring community. I use the art and the tool of coloring to bring people closer together, to heal, to create space for you to unlock your creativity and essentially your potential. Because 70+% of people don't feel like they're meeting their potential in life. And they go through life not ever feeling like they've met their potential. And so I work with folks and create the space for them to unlock this through coloring. And so my coloring community, which is called the Color Crew, is where we come together every week, every Wednesday, and we color. We have a conversation of what's going on. I create coloring sheets that I design myself each week. And if it's stress, then we talk about how does that show up. Sometimes we talk, sometimes we just put on music and just be and color the sheets for ourselves. And it's creating the space for the person first, and then it expands out to businesses and organizations. But to pause and to really figure out like what is going on? Who am I? How am I existing in the world? What's up? Quick check-in, all of those, which is similar to what you're doing. And so being in these similar spaces, but having slightly different approaches, but it's creating the space for people to ask themselves truly, like, who am I? What do I want? What's going on?
I love that. Instead of just being a doing machine, which we can tend to become doing machines. And I just encourage everyone listening to this, if you feel like you're just on this hamster wheel of do, especially with the new school season that we're in, because I know I'm feeling it. You're a human being first, and it's so important to find something, a space where you can tap into your potential and also get to know yourself and like think about yourself for once. What you want, what you need to be able to voice it with other people, or just have a space to slow down, which is what I think is so special about what you're doing, is just having a space for people to go. Because that's the thing, I thought about sharing rituals that replenish as just like a downloadable PDF. Buy this, here are the prompts, go for it. But I know moms and I know women, and we're busy and we're serving other people and we're killing it at work. We're killing it at home. We are not gonna take time to journal for ourselves. And that's where, hey, show up to Zoom for 90 minutes comes in. So I think it's absolutely genius that you create a weekly space that's structured for people, somewhere to go, somewhere to be with others doing the same thing together. It's really powerful when you do something in community. I have to say. So thank you for sharing that. Where can is the link easy to share, or should I just put it in the show notes?
It's both. So I think it's pretty easy to share. For the color community, it's colorfulcrew.com is where you go to find more information. And then of course of the business as a whole, headphonesandcrayons.com.
Perfect. Okay, Nikita, thank you so much. Like seriously, this was such a healing conversation and helpful conversation. And it just makes me feel so grateful to know you. So grateful like that we crossed paths a couple of years ago. Just so glad. And for your Instagram and your socials. I'm going to make sure those are in the show notes as well. But all of you listening, make sure you go over to Nikita's socials and say hi to her and check out her work, because what she's doing is really powerful and really meaningful. And I want to thank you if you made it to the end of the podcast episode. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for spending your precious time with me. I do not take it for granted. And I will hopefully see you next week on another episode of the No Longer Last Journey. Take care, everybody. Thank you, Nikita. Bye now.
Thank you for having me.